Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to discuss the concept of agreements as understood within the Toltec tradition. We are going to discuss why they are called agreements and what purpose it serves to frame them as such. Agreements play a central role not just in Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements, but in his works and the Toltec tradition in general. By understanding agreements, you will understand just how much we, sometimes consciously, but usually unconsciously, say yes to throughout our lives, how much it shapes how we see the world, our daily interactions with it, and consequently, how the human experience turns out for us. It is how to shift from unconscious to conscious agreements that will be the focus of this video. More specifically, the Toltec tradition teaches that from the moment we are born, we begin forming agreements, both with ourselves and with the world around us. They are conditioned responses, beliefs, and interpretations of reality that we absorb as we grow up. By understanding and consciously choosing the agreements we live by, we can transform our lives in ways that are both practical and liberating. The Toltec tradition is an ancient Mexican spiritual and philosophical path focused on personal freedom, self-awareness, and mastery of perception. It teaches that reality is a collective dream shaped by agreements, and by questioning limiting beliefs, one can awaken to true awareness. The Toltecs view life as an art, emphasizing conscious choice, transformation, and love as the foundation for living authentically and breaking free from societal conditioning. Now, most of the agreements we hold were given to us before we were even old enough to question them. Parents, teachers, society, and religion all played a role in shaping how we see ourselves and what we believe is possible. They can be both beneficial and detrimental to our well-being and ability to thrive and contribute to the greater whole in a positive manner. Most agreements are not handed down to us with malicious intent, even though there are some such agreements as well. If someone is constantly told, for example, that they are not good enough, whether overtly or covertly, or to look at the world and other people in a very specific way, they may internalize these agreements and live their life through the lens of self-doubt, or look at certain people with suspicion and prejudice. On the other hand, someone who is encouraged to see their potential and meet life with openness might approach life with confidence and curiosity. One particularly insidious agreement is, I will not stop suffering until these requirements are fulfilled. Furthermore, agreements such as, I am not good enough, may also come with other sub-agreements, such as, I am not worthy, or I am not capable of walking a different path than the one society hands me. The teachings about agreements are similar to other teachings, such as, for example, ones about limiting beliefs, but it captures a wider range of the human experience. An agreement is any idea or perception we accept as true, as well as our conditioned responses, whether empowering or limiting. It is a choice, conscious or unconscious, that shapes how we interpret reality. This last part is important, as we need to recognize that we are making choices even when they are unconscious. A limiting belief, on the other hand, is a specific type of agreement that restricts personal growth, potential, or well-being. It imposes boundaries on what one believes is possible. All limiting beliefs are agreements, but not all agreements are limiting beliefs. The key difference is that agreements can be empowering, while limiting beliefs always create restrictions. What they both have in common is that they are usually unconscious. Usually, the messages we receive from the world are not as straightforward as someone spelling out, "You are not good enough," to us, even if it may of course happen. Instead, it is usually through our personal experiences of the world and other people, and the messages that we receive through our interactions, whether real, imagined, or somewhere in between, that our agreements are shaped. Also, as mentioned, we usually have not spelled our agreement out to ourselves. If, for example, one or both parents constantly are talking about this or that person's deceitful intentions and behavior, This is likely the message that the child will receive, even if they are not explicitly telling the child that people cannot be trusted. And to us, if we've made such an agreement, it's usually just how the world is. This could lead to suspicion, distance, and difficulty forming deep relationships. On the other hand, if someone is raised to believe that people are generally kind and trustworthy, they are more likely to approach others with openness and connection. Therefore, it's important not just to be careful with what we take in, but also with the messages we send out. One of the most powerful realizations in the Toltec path is that agreements are not fixed. They are choices, which is why they are framed as agreements, whether we made them consciously or not. That means they can be changed, they can be broken. However, as we just talked about, before we start realizing that agreements such as those just mentioned are just something we've said yes to, with no inherent truth or falsity to them, we usually look at them simply as how the world is. We don't see that thoughts like everyone is just looking out for themselves are just that. Thoughts with no objective way of testing their accuracy. Just because our experiences seem to tell us one thing, it doesn't say anything about how the world actually is, unless the experiences truly are universally applicable. Furthermore, whether you want to attribute metaphysical explanations to this or not, we also tend to find ourselves in situations that confirm our beliefs, whether they are positive or negative, and we are more prone to remembering information and experiences that confirm our beliefs while forgetting those that contradict them. Now, we've mainly looked at agreements in the form of beliefs. Therefore, we will now look at a few examples beyond the realm of beliefs. An agreement can also be a habitual response or behavior. For example, if someone grows up in a household where expressing emotions is discouraged, they might form an agreement to always suppress their feelings, not because they consciously believe emotions are bad, but because they have learned that showing emotions leads to discomfort or rejection. This agreement shapes their actions, staying silent when upset, avoiding vulnerability, or dismissing their own emotional needs. If a certain agreement is causing suffering or holding one back, one can not only break it, but one also has the power to replace it with a new one. This is where the concept of the 4 agreements comes in. Since we have a whole series on the 4 agreements, we are just going to touch upon them. And the 5th agreement, briefly here to illustrate how positive, constructive agreements work and how they relate to the negative agreements that we may have made throughout our lifetimes. There will also be a video on the 5th agreement in the future. The first agreement is to be impeccable with your word. Words are more than just sounds or symbols. They are the building blocks of perception. What we say to ourselves and others can either create clarity or confusion, love or fear. Being impeccable with your word means speaking with integrity, saying only what you mean, and avoiding the trap of using words to manipulate or harm. This includes how you talk to yourself. Many people have a habit of repeating negative self-talk, reinforcing old agreements that do not serve them. Changing the words we use can shift our reality in ways that are subtle but profound. The second agreement is to not take anything personally. This might seem difficult because human beings are naturally reactive. When someone criticizes, insults, or mistreats us, it often feels personal. But according to the Toltec view, what others say and do is a reflection of their own agreements, not a statement about us. If someone is angry, jealous, or rude, it is often because they are caught in their own inner struggles. Recognizing this allows us to step back instead of being drawn into unnecessary conflict. It is not about ignoring emotions or suppressing reactions. It is about understanding that we are not at the mercy of others' opinions. The third agreement is to not make assumptions. This is a habit many people do not even realize they have. We assume we know what others are thinking. We assume we understand situations fully. We assume we are being judged. Most misunderstandings, conflicts, and unnecessary suffering come from these assumptions. A more practical way to navigate life is to ask questions, seek clarity, and communicate directly. Instead of assuming someone is upset with you, ask them how they feel. Instead of assuming you know the whole story, gather more information. This small shift can prevent countless unnecessary conflicts and stress. The fourth agreement is to always do your best. This does not mean pushing yourself to exhaustion or perfectionism. It means doing the best you can in any given moment, given your circumstances. Some days, your best will be full of energy and motivation. Other days, it may simply be getting through the day without breaking down. Understanding that your best changes from moment to moment prevents self-judgment and regret. The goal is progress, not perfection. The fifth agreement is, be skeptical, but learn to listen. It deepens the practices of the four others and invites a balance between questioning what we hear and remaining open to new perspectives. The modern world is full of misinformation, conflicting opinions, and noise, and we cannot trust the sources that we are told are trustworthy either. It is easy to fall into the trap of believing something just because it is repeated often. But being skeptical in a positive sense means taking a step back and asking, is this really true? Where did this belief come from? At the same time, listening is just as important. It means staying open, not shutting out new information because it conflicts with one's current worldview or identity. It is a skill that requires awareness, recognizing when the mind is filtering reality through old agreements and when it is truly open to learning. This, in turn, requires a commitment to doing one's best to let go of the ego's attachment to being right and having its views affirmed, which, in turn, requires that one becomes aware of this very human tendency. It is very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that one's views are just how things are, and making those that see things differently into enemies. Agreements are everywhere, not just in our personal lives, but in society as a whole. Nations, cultures, and institutions are built on agreements. Some of these agreements serve humanity, while others create division and suffering. Recognizing this helps in understanding that no system is absolute. Everything we accept as reality is built on layers of agreements that can be questioned and changed. The Toltec tradition goes even further when it comes to this. Ruiz and others describe the world we live in as a collective dream, a shared reality shaped by agreements, beliefs, and conditioning passed down through generations. This dream is not just an individual experience, but a vast construction of thoughts, perceptions, and societal structures that form the fabric of human life. This dream is closely tied to the agreements, as we, from birth, we are taught how to dream according to the rules of those who came before us. Parents, teachers, religious figures, and institutions shape our understanding of reality, feeding us ideas about what is right and wrong, possible and impossible. These ideas become the foundation of the collective dream, influencing how we see ourselves and the world around us. In the Toltec tradition, the concept of the collective dream is meant literally in the sense that human perception itself is a form of dreaming, and that, according to this view, there is no objective, solid reality outside of human perception. This is a view that may seem hard to believe to some, but certain schools of quantum physics, such as the Copenhagen School, actually support it, and it is echoed in many different spiritual teachings, both modern and ancient, across the world. Ruiz explains that the mind is always dreaming, whether the brain is awake or asleep. The main difference is that when we are awake, there is a material frame that makes us perceive things in a more structured, linear way. When we sleep, this frame dissolves and the dream becomes fluid, shifting constantly. The moment we become aware that we are living in a dream, we gain the power to reshape it. Instead of blindly accepting the version of reality given to us, we can consciously create a new dream, one based on authenticity rather than fear. So how does one start applying this in everyday life? First, awareness is key. Get into the habit of observing yourself. Begin noticing the agreements that shape your reality. When a negative thought arises, ask yourself, is this something I've consciously agreed to, or is it something I was taught to believe? Second, practice replacing limiting agreements with new ones. If the old agreement says, I am not good enough, replace it, for example, with one that says, I am learning and growing every day. This should just be looked upon as an example, though, and you are encouraged to find agreements that work for you personally. The 4 agreements are a good foundation, as they are universally applicable, and they will usually soon prove their usefulness when taken seriously. In this, it's also important to challenge oneself and get out of one's comfort zone. What we usually learn is that the limits we've placed upon our capacity are artificial. We've just never found this out, since we've been hindered by our limiting beliefs. The third step is to use the agreements as daily tools. When speaking, remember to be impeccable with your word. When emotions flare up, remind yourself not to take things personally. When misunderstandings arise, pause and question whether assumptions are at play. When faced with a challenge, simply do your best. And when confronted with new information, balance skepticism with an open mind. Transforming agreements is not about reaching a perfect state. It's about creating more freedom, clarity, and ease in life. Some agreements will be harder to break than others. Some will take time. But with patience and practice, the changes begin to show. Little by little, old agreements lose their grip and new ones take root. It is an ongoing process, one that leads to greater self-awareness and a way of moving through life with less suffering and more peace. And ultimately, that is what this path is about. Not perfection, but liberation from agreements that do not serve us, and the creation of new ones that bring greater clarity, connection, and authenticity. In summary, agreements are the foundation of how we perceive and interact with the world. They shape our thoughts, emotions, and actions, but they are not set in stone. By recognizing, questioning, and transforming the agreements that limit us, we gain the power to create a life based on awareness, authenticity, and freedom. If you want to put things into perspective, you may watch a historical movie and think about what kinds of insanity were regarded as totally normal in, for example, the ancient Roman Empire. You may then ask yourself what kinds of insanity you see around you today that people generally don't question because they are raised into regarding it as just natural parts of being human. You are finally encouraged to reflect on the relationship between your own personal agreements and the collective agreements that shape the collective dream. What agreements can you break to begin to change the collective dream? As was mentioned in the video, we have a whole series about the 4 agreements, and there is a link to it on the end screen that you are seeing now, together with a link to a video about self-observation as taught within the 4th Way system that will help you discover what you have unconsciously agreed to. You've now reached the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for your time.